Are you thinking about marriage, or perhaps wondering why marriage is so difficult for so many couples? Maybe the critical issue is the right questions were not or are not being asked. What are the questions you need to cover before you even get engaged? Let's talk about it here at 180 Truth, because you know what?
We must face the moment of truth, baby.
It's time to face the moment of truth. Thank you for being here at 180 Truth, and I want to encourage you to come on through to simplyaviance.com, get some fresh gear, help me get a cup of coffee. Simplyaviance.com. If you sign up for the first time, 25% off your first order and free shipping on orders of $100 or more. Please, we are a small business out of Winter Haven, Florida. Come through and support the channel. Support simplyaviance.com. Grace and peace, family. Welcome to 180 Truth.
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
I'm Dr. Honorio Chaparro, and I want to share some truth with you through the form of questions. Questions reveal the level of our thinking, and so often there are so many people who get into relationships without thinking, or they're thinking in very poor ways. And there is an old article that I have used through the years when I am teaching couples in premarital. When I'm counseling a couple, preparing them for a lifelong union, which is the Christian ideal. I'm coming from a Christian perspective, and I know there are all kinds of perspectives out there about, is marriage worth it? Why bother getting married, etc., etc. I'm not here to deal with that, because at the end of the day, most people long for intimacy. Intimacy is defined as the desire to know and be known, and the reality is there is a unique knowing that is exclusive to the marriage covenant, to the marriage relationship, to marriage being a calling of God. I'll talk about that at another time. I want to get into this article here from 2006 that I still think is worth reviewing, looking at. It's coming from a secular perspective for the most part. And so you have to ask yourself, why would people get into these situations, this serious relationship, and not cover all the bases? Well, we'll also address that. A big part of it is people suspend their judgment for what it is that they're hoping or wishing for. Quite often people already see the issues, and quite often they don't want to discuss the issues because they're afraid of losing someone. But you know all those things. But let's talk about this article here in the New York Times. In the New York Times, this is Field Ed Notes. It says December 17th, 2006, marriage is not built on surprises. Marriage is not built on surprises. Eric Copage, in love as in other matters, what you don't know may hurt you. That's for certain. Amanda Campo and Todd Johnson realized that last April when the two 28-year-olds participated in Catholic Engaged Encounter, a retreat with 44 other couples who were planning to marry in the Roman Catholic Church. They remembered being surprised that so many of the couples seemed so seriously out of sync. For instance, when the couples were asked whether they would start a family within a year of their marriage, nearly 3/4 said they hadn't discussed the timing and were in disagreement on that point, recalled Ms. Campo, a graphic designer in San Francisco for the Banana Republic website. That's a big thing to talk about, she said, adding that she and Mr. Johnson had decided around the time of their engagement to wait 3 to 4 years after the marriage before having children. This is something they should have discussed. Homeboy should have had that discussion before he bought the ring. I'm just keeping it 100. Even so, Ms. Campo and Mr. Johnson, who had known each other for 6 years and were raised in the same cultural and religious traditions, had obvious issues that they hadn't addressed. For instance, who would manage the money in their marriage? That's a big question. You want to know the answer? Well, that would be another video. She automatically thought, you're in finance, you should do all that, said Mr. Johnson, a financial manager at genz, the biotechnical company in South San Francisco, California. Not sure if that still exists. He told her that the way she handled her own finances was impressive and that she should handle theirs. For us, out of all the questions, we were 85% the same, said Ms. Campo, who married Mr. Johnson in October. But a lot of couples were 85% different. Wow. And there's some discussion there about finances, and finances being something the couple need to be committed to together. Because ultimately, the managing of the finances is a reflection of your priorities, of your values. For too many couples, the spouses to be assume that they know each other and the ground rules for their marriages, experts say. And sometimes those heading to the altar dodge important questions because they don't want to rock the boat. Exactly. Now, why would they think they know each other? Could it be because they've already had physical intimacy? And physical intimacy gives you an illusion of intimacy. There's a spiritual bonding that takes place for sure, but that doesn't mean you know the person. You may know them physically in some ways, but you don't know the person. A commitment to fidelity. Here's the thing about physical intimacy, what people don't realize is that it impairs our judgment because it creates a sense of intimacy and knowing, but it really is incomplete. Let's continue. A commitment to fidelity, for example, is a crucial issue, but one that is rarely addressed, said Robert, I have no idea how to pronounce that name, the executive director of the National Institute of Relationship Enhancement in Bethesda, MD. It is important to make those implicit assumptions about fidelity explicit, he said. Once the commitment to faithfulness is made explicit, it becomes more difficult psychologically to engage rationalizations. Wow. Seth Eisenberg leads classes for new instructors at an independent marriage education organization based in Weston, Florida called PAIRS, which stands for Practical Application of Intimate Relationship Skills. I don't know if any of these places and spaces or even these people still working in this place. Again, this goes back to 2006, but I still think this article is timeless. He uncovered more basic questions. He recounted a recent class that his organization held in Fort Lauderdale. A young man, a newlywed, thought his role was to be responsible for all the decision making for the couple. Mr. Eisenberg said, however, the couple had never discussed those issues, and his assumption came as a surprise to her. What's the principle, family? Assumption is the lowest form of knowledge. Assumption is the lowest form of knowledge. We all know what happens if you make assumptions. Debt is another important issue. Gary Skoloff, a partner at Skoloff and Wolf, a matrimonial law firm in Livingston, New Jersey, recalled one divorce case his firm handled. Only after the couple married did the husband learn that his new wife had $230,000 in college debt. Yo, that was a big mistake. Why would he make that judgment or misjudgment? I said before, sometimes folks get caught up in the physical intimacy, actually a lot of times. And because she went on to become a legal aid lawyer, Mr. Skoloff said her ability to pay back the debt was nil. Although a husband or wife is not automatically liable for the spouse's debt, Mr. Skoloff noted that in a case like this one, she could argue that he promised that he would help pay it when they got married, or that she was spending all her income after marriage on the family rather than paying off the debt. Either of those scenarios can trigger a legal nightmare. It often helps to have a forum for those sensitive discussions. A wide range of premarital counseling options have cropped up to meet the need. Many couples seek counseling through their religious institutions, best known source being the Roman Catholic program called Pre-Cana. I don't know about that program, but most of the churches that I know have some form of a premarital counseling, premarital courses. But usually the people that show up at the courses, they've already started planning the wedding, paying for the wedding. And so quite often they're sitting there and they're already invested in so much that to have the revelation that they're not meant to be together, quite often they'll just bite the bullet and go for it. And they pay the price on the other end. But it's difficult for any person or institution to prescribe a single set of questions that every couple should ask each other before marrying. Something of vital importance to one couple may be a non-issue to another. Stick to the end, because I actually think, again, 2006, I actually have a book that you need to invest in if you're thinking about getting married. A good place to start would be for a couple to ask why they should not get married, suggests Corey Donaldson of Salt Lake City, the author of Don't You Get Married Until You Read This. It's the reasons that people should not get married that are going to cause trouble down the line. Tony Hillman, the senior leader of the New York Society of Ethical Culture, said couples often fail to talk about religion, not whether they will go to church, mosque, or synagogue together, he said, but what role faith will play in a time of crisis. If you have somebody who is even nominally religious in a traditional sense with someone who is an agnostic humanist, have they really discussed that? Wow. Asking these tough questions in a rat-a-tat fashion about a potential life partner's orientation, medical history, including certain kinds of illnesses, as you can read there, is unlikely to nurture the relationship. Dr. Derek Sweet, shout out to him, good brother, the chief executive of Full Circle Health, a counseling center in the Bronx, recommends a gentle, teachable moments approach if asking those questions without the benefit of a counselor. Wait for your opportunities and share from your own background first, he suggested. You might be in the car with somebody and the person says, I'm investing in a stock. And you can say, oh, are you into stocks? Do you have your own savings plan? I know I do. And that should open up a dialogue. Timing is everything. If you go with a checklist, you're going to turn that person off. And that is true depending on how old a couple is, where they are in their life, and so on. Depends on their mindset. The reality of it is a lot of folks start dating without necessarily the end goal of marriage. Marriage sometimes comes up as an accident after this monogamy experiment works out. So it really just depends on the stage of life, where you're at, and so on. You might turn somebody off, or you might discover that this person is just as serious as you are about the business, the calling of marriage. So I want to get into some actual. You can I'll recommend the link for the article in the New York Times in the description. But again, just continuing to wrap this up, Mr. Skoloff, the lawyer, also recommends lots of hand-holding while making those inquiries, although it's difficult to imagine how intertwined fingers could take the edge off one question, he suggested. If either the potential spouse or his or her family has a history of, well, illness. Couples should remember that the responses to premarital questions, whether asked bluntly or gently, aren't necessarily going to cause doubt, acrimony, or anxiety. 90% of the time, the problems that come up are about a breakdown in communication, Mr. Eisberg said. And remember, when communication breaks down, abnormality sets in. And the end of all abnormality is death. In the case of the newlyweds in Fort Lauderdale, he said the wife didn't disagree with the decisions her husband was making. She just wanted to be part of the process. So I want to go through some of those questions. But again, when you think about this reality that people will go ahead, get married, and not ask the right questions. I want you to we're going to read through some of these questions here, and then I'm going to wrap it up with the book recommendation, especially if you're not engaged yet. So let's transition here. Again, this was a supplement to the article I just read about questions couples should ask or wish they had before marrying. Number 1. Have we discussed whether or not to have children? If the answer is yes, who is going to be the primary caregiver? You know, someone may ask, okay, when are you supposed to ask these questions? Well, number 1, whenever you're deciding that you are looking for a relationship that will commit to marriage. If that's your mindset, then these questions are questions you can ask organically, you can ask through the process. And again, we're oftentimes afraid of scaring somebody off. Okay, I'm looking too serious and so on. Well, if you're serious and they're not, why pretend? Sometimes we can be so desperate, and everything we do needs to be rooted in faith, not fear. If you're afraid of driving somebody away, well, that person being driven away, that person is not ready for you. You're willing. The marriage is not a construction project. Neither are the right relationships of any kind. People have to be educated, trained. I agree with that. But if you're walking in fear, you're in a place of weakness, and you need to be in a position of authority. Always walk from a place of authority. Discussing these questions doesn't mean you're committing to marriage. These are questions to ask, to explore. Also, be careful. Well, I'll talk in another video about managing your expectations. Another question, do we have a clear idea of each other's financial obligations and goals? Do our ideas about spending and saving mesh? Have we discussed our expectations for how the household will be maintained, and are we in agreement on who will manage the chores? Have we fully disclosed our health histories, both physical and mental? Is my partner affectionate to the degree that I expect? Can we comfortably and openly discuss our sex needs, preferences, and fears? Will there be a television in the bedroom? That's big. That's really big for couples, family, especially younger couples that, well, again, have to develop a solid foundation for intimacy. Very important. Do we truly listen to each other and fairly consider one another's ideas and complaints? Have we reached a clear understanding of each other's spiritual beliefs and needs? Have we discussed when and how our children will be exposed to religious moral education? This is the mistake that I've seen over the years. People assume that the other person is in the same faith base because they go to the same faith location. Wrong. Just because they say they're Christian, that doesn't mean that most of their life they're not living like a practical atheist. Why do people do this? Because people of all religions live like practical atheists. What do I mean? Well, their religion is a preference, not a conviction. Their religion is something like a choice of coffee that makes them feel better. They treat it like a consumer mentality as opposed to it being the center. And so the quality of that centering on their religion is revealed oftentimes in crisis. So, do we like each other and respect each other's friends? Do we value and respect each other's parents? And is either of us concerned about whether the parents will interfere with the relationship? What does my family do that annoys you? Are there some things that you and I are not prepared to give up in the marriage? Big question. If one of us were to be offered a career opportunity in a location far from the other's family, are we prepared to move? Do each of us feel confident in the other's commitment to the marriage and believe that the bond can survive whatever challenges we may face? Those are big questions, and I can spend a lot of time talking about them. Maybe I'll do a live stream on this topic and we can walk through those questions. Let me know what you think in the comments. But as we just think about these questions, Jesus asked a lot of questions. People would roll up on him and he would say, hey, what do you want? What are you looking for? What can I do for you? What do you want me to do for you? He would ask questions. We oftentimes don't ask questions, especially once the physical intimacy gets into the picture, all things get confused. Sometimes we start working to make the relationship happen because we're guilty or we're tired of sleeping around. Sometimes we do that and then we think, okay, well, everything will work out, and sometimes the physical intimacy is used in the relationship to kind of quiet the differences that will show up later on. Again, the danger of physical intimacy before marriage will always be that physical intimacy perverts judgment. Now, for those of you that like these questions, again, I'll put the link in the description, but there is a book that I often recommend, 101 Questions to Ask Before You Get Engaged. If you are a serious Christian, if you and this other person are seriously committed to your faith journey, this book, starting this when things are heating up, starting this book, going through this book, and I would recommend going through this book with an elder, a minister, a pastor, a priest, whoever is your spiritual covering, but definitely between the two of you, start this book, ask the hard questions, and have layers of accountability in your life, because those layers of accountability in your life will challenge you to see what is there. Because when someone shows you who they are, believe them. But also, they will also help you to be in tune with what you really want and why you want it. Because most folks don't know what they want and why they want it.
And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
Family, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment, let me know your thoughts. Should we do a live stream on this? Should we talk some more about this? Are you interested in this conversation about the questions? Do you want to review the questions? Let's talk about it. But again, please hit like, subscribe, share, leave a comment. Thank you for being here at 180 Truth. God bless.